Hello and welcome to Coffee with Dr. Carla. I'm Dr. Carla. This is Kirsten. And today we are going to talk about some mental health related issues and hopefully start to end some of the stigma around it. And we're glad you're here to take part in that with us. So identity is a huge issue. And we hear about, identity in a wide variety of ways, especially now in media. But I think that when it comes to performance, whether it's athletic or musical or perhaps a career, we tie what we do to who we are. And so that could be very powerful and drive you to, higher levels, but it also can be the thing that undoes everything and you become unhinged and then, you get left with this kind of vast void, right, if something changes. So, in your experience, both as an athlete as well as in the work you're trying to do with your master's degree, how do you see this identity piece showing up?
I think it is the root of all struggles and issues within the sports specific world when I'm thinking about athletes. But it's also the root of a lot of success and enjoyment. And so it's really, really hard. Like you said, there's that fine line between feeling empowered by your sport and committed and all these things. But if you just cross that line, it can become obsessive and, it can really take a toll on your self-worth. And so
I've seen people crumble and just fall apart because, this identity issue and they can't get out of that pit because of it. So like it's more than just, it can't be more than just an obstacle. I mean, it could be life altering.
Yeah, it defines you. And it's, I mean, I experienced it myself as an athlete. Like everything that I experienced outside of track was still somehow tied to track. And so how I was doing in track impacted how I was doing in school, how I felt about my body, how I, the way I worked in relationships. Like it seems on the surface like, okay, you're running well or you're not. Like, yeah, that might make you feel good or bad about yourself, but it's like, it's so much deeper than that. And how you live your life, when I'm, again, speaking mostly of athletes specifically, so much of what you do, the way you think about yourself, your behaviors, it all is surrounding, how am I going to perform? Like, what time should I go to bed? What should I eat? How do I look? Should I be going out on the weekends? All that stuff. And part of that, coaches are going to say, that's great. You're super motivated and committed.
Dedicated to your, It's interesting because, as you were talking, I was reminded when I was running half marathons, somebody from, I forget, I want to say it was like the Luna bars or something like that. But anyhow, they were doing this survey, they were doing these interviews with athletes, right? And so they reached out to the team I was running with and asked us if we wanted to participate. And my response was, well, I would, but I'm not an athlete. And she wrote back, you do run, right? I go, yeah. Okay, you're an athlete. I'm like, no, but I'm not an athlete. You run regularly, right? I said, yeah. You're an athlete. No. Okay, you've run this year. How many half marathons?
Right.
They're like, what do you mean I'm an athlete? And I remember it was, you would think that it'd be like, oh my God, it was actually upsetting. I struggled with it horribly because like all of a sudden I had to think, it sounds weird, but I had to think positively about that part of me, right? Like, that I could identify myself as an athlete, right? And after, I didn't start running until I was, let's see, how old was I? I was 39 when I started running, right? So, the reality of it is like, this was like a total shift in like, my identity, right? Like, so it's like and literally half of our interview was her trying to convince me that I really was an athlete, and then we did the interview that she wanted to do, right? But it was just crazy to think that was such a thing. And at that point, I already had a doctorate in education. I mean, it wasn't like I wasn't an accomplished person, right?
Right.
But like, it was interesting. So that identity is so huge, but it did make such a huge difference in how I approached my sport after that. And even now, after I've stopped running,
Yeah.
I still consider myself an athlete, whereas I would not have done that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think about the flip side too of, you had never considered yourself an athlete and now someone's telling you are and how to handle that new identity. Whereas I'm now like recently retired college athlete and I'm, the last 5 years, everything revolved around track. Now what am I? Like, what is there to me? So it's kind of like the
Yeah.
reverse of it.
Well, and I know that once I accepted the identity of an athlete, then I'm like, oh my God, what responsibilities come with that?
Right. How
Right.
does an athlete live their life? Yeah. Do they do themselves? Yeah, that's
Right.
the whole thing. And so it can be a positive motivating thing, but it can also be a really hurtful thing.
So what are some of the things that you have found? I mean, you're talking about the fact that right now you are in the process of shifting from an athlete to a retired athlete. That's not to say you're not going to recreationally run or recreationally participate in sport, or maybe you find something else that you're going to be competitive in, as you move along in your life. But at this point, at this particular stage of your life, it's a process of retirement because you just finished your last season,
Yeah.
right? And so, talk about a little bit how you're dealing with that shift in identity.
I think the beginning of it, I struggled a lot in my last year of track. And so I think when it first ended, it was a lot of relief. Like it would be completely different if I was having like PRs and doing super well. That would be hard to let go. But I think it's kind of been like a long time coming almost. And so I was ready to be done. And I think that's kind of where I've been at since it's only been a few months. The kicker is going to be when I go back to school and I see my teammates or I see, it's the fall and I should be doing fall training or whatever.
And part of school is going to be working with these,
Athletes.
and so now you're no longer having that dual role of the athlete and the consultant. Now you're just simply
only doing consultant.
No such thing as simply and only, but you're going to have a singular role.
Yeah. So I think that is when I will face more challenges. Not to say I'm not currently. I think, I don't know, I'm doing a lot of what I would tell my athletes to do, which is just trying to kind of debunk what the sports world wants me to think about myself almost. So I think,
what are some of those things that the sports world is trying to push out there?
Yeah, like I think we had just said one of if you do everything revolving around your sport, that just means you care. And if you play through injury and you don't talk about your struggles, that just means you're tough, and that's how it should be. And if I leave the track and I don't beat myself up over not PRing, then I simply don't care. Things like that. So it's
well, and I will also say that if you run recreationally, like I did, like even though I was part of a team and everything like that, the competition was more a self competition. I'm just a recreational runner, so I'm not an athlete, and that's a big reason why I didn't believe I was an athlete because that's what world said. Well, you're not winning half marathons.
Yeah. I was only running D2, or I was only running. Yeah.
I was only I wasn't at this particular level, therefore I can't be an athlete. Or, because I didn't run the whole thing, I did a walk-run combo. Well, then clearly you are not an athlete because you're not running the whole thing. Like, there's a lot of really negative crap that gets thrown around there.
Right. So it's really, I think this transition phase for me is like untraining and retraining my brain. Like when I go to do a run and I've been taught, you better be on the ground, like dead tired or else you didn't give it 100%.
Right.
And just, realizing now like it doesn't need to be that way, or my life doesn't need to revolve around how much I weigh and how much I can lift and, how long I can run for. Like those things that were so ingrained in me by my own pressures, by coaches, by media, like all of the sports world that taught me that for the last 5 years, that's going to be the tricky part of unlearning and retraining my brain.
And to be okay with the fact that you can just have fun.
Yeah.
Like with no other
and just feel
no other goal.
To feel good.
Just have fun.
Yeah, you don't need to be accomplishing, there doesn't have to be a time to hit or a competition. I can just move my body to feel good and to help my mind.
Whatever that might look like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot around identity. And so, if you're dealing with anything related to identity, I would highly encourage you to talk to a professional. If it's, primarily around performance or sport, definitely, seek out a certified mental performance consultant. If you feel like it's manifesting in much more mental health like issues with more panic attacks or depression, then seek out a mental health person like a counselor, a social worker, etc. So remember, you can change your thoughts, discover your potential, and transform your life by focusing on your overall well being. So until next time, continue working on being the best you possible. Bye.